This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by the Stirling Soap Company. I'm a big fan of shave soap. I've been using different brands for years, and I recently gave Stirling's shave soaps a try, and I've been very happy with the results. Stirling's shave soaps give you a great lather and a frictionless feel that allows the razor to glide right over the skin for a super close shave. No skin irritation and a clean, refreshing feel with no soapy residue after. I can tell you without a doubt, it's simply the best shave I've ever had. And my wife has noticed too. And here's the thing. With the ability to purchase 1-ounce sample pucks, you can try out different scents to find the right one for you. Give Stirling Soap a try today. Visit stirlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. It's September 5th, and hey, what do you say? The NFL season is officially underway, and if you have any Cowboys or Eagles on your fantasy roster, you've probably been checking where your team is heading into the first full weekend of NFL games. I'm recording this prior to that game ending, so I'm not exactly sure how players were doing last night, but hopefully you've got somebody on your fantasy team that did what Peyton Manning did on this day back in 2013. Peyton's Denver Broncos opened the NFL season with Baltimore in the NFL kickoff game. This was a rematch of the previous season's divisional playoff game, which, if you remember, was the mile-high miracle game won by the Ravens after Joe Flacco's 70-yard bomb to Jacoby Jones to force overtime. So the Broncos were looking to avenge that one a little bit on this opening night. After going scoreless in the first quarter and the Ravens holding a 7-0 lead, Manning went to work. He threw back-to-back touchdown passes to Julian Thomas, but the Broncos still trailed 17-14 at the break. From there, it was mostly Denver, scoring 28 straight points, all by the arm of Peyton Manning. He connected with Andre Caldwell, twice to Wes Welker, and then he hit Demaryius Thomas to make it 42-17 in the fourth. Maybe if the Ravens had not scored with 5.5 to play to make it a 2-possession game, Manning would have holstered the gun, but instead, with the ball and time, he hit Demaryius Thomas again, this time for a 78-yard TD strike.
Pick up the blitz, flag is thrown. There's your first down and a lot more for Demaryius Thomas. He'll go all the way to the end zone, but a penalty marker at the onset of the play.
Offside, number 58, defense lined up in the neutral zone. The penalty declined, touchdown.
Elvis Dumerville. And for Manning, 7 touchdown passes. He's the 6th man in NFL history to throw 7 in a game.
Manning's stats for the night were off the charts. He completed 27 of 42 passes for 462 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. His 7 touchdown passes tied him for the NFL record for a single game with 5 others at the time. The last to do it prior to him was Joe Kapp back in the 1969 season, 44 years earlier. It's been done twice since. Nick Foles threw 7 TDs about 2 months later, and Drew Brees equaled that in 2015. Now, if you were in a PPR league and you had Manning as your starter on this night, he racked up an amazing 49.3 points for you. That is the highest individual game total in the history of fantasy football. Now, of course, Peyton benefited greatly from what happened on this day in 1906, when the first legal forward pass was thrown in a football game. And can we all just give a little bit of a hallelujah for that? I mean, I don't mind watching a wishbone offense every now and again, and even the occasional 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but the forward pass was a necessary rule change to make the game more fun to watch. Yeah, but wouldn't you know it, the first legal one was incomplete. On this day, it was St. Louis playing at Carroll College in Waukesha, Wisconsin. St. Louis's Bradbury Robinson put the first pigskin in flight, legally that is, past the line of scrimmage before it fell harmlessly to the dirt. But they weren't done. Even though their first try failed, they tried again later in the game. And this time, Robinson found a willing receiver named Jack Schneider, who reeled in a 20-yard pass for a touchdown. St. Louis went on to win that game 22-0. And St. Louis utilized the forward pass to great effectiveness that season, and it sounds like they had a pretty good defense too. They went undefeated in 1906 and outscored their opponents 407-11 that year. Talking about slinging it, how about Tony Peña, who could flat out put one on a rope from a prone position behind home plate to second base to nab a speedy base stealer? But on this night in 1997, Peña did not get somebody out with his arm. Instead, he used his brain and a little subterfuge to get the out. This was Peña's 18th and final season in the majors, and he was playing for the Houston Astros at this point, the final of the 6 teams he'd play for. The Astros were in San Francisco on this night. It was the bottom of the 8th inning, and the Giants had just struck for a couple of runs to make it a 4-1 game, and they were threatening again with men on second and third and Brian Johnson at the plate. Astros reliever John Hudek had the count at 2-2 when Peña came out for a mound visit. Peña had an idea to get the final out of the inning and to get out with no more damage. They were going to fake an intentional walk.
Tony Peña came back and he signaled 4 to Larry Kirker.
He bluffed him. Strike 3 call.
So they got out of the inning, but they couldn't come up with any runs themselves in the top of the 9th, and they lost 4-1. Now, this was not the first time that Peña had actually pulled off the fake intentional walk. When he was with the Cleveland Indians in the mid-90s, they were in a series with the Toronto Blue Jays when he pulled it off against John Olerud. And Peña wasn't the only guy to do it either. In Game 3 of the '72 World Series, Oakland manager Dick Williams instructed Raleigh Fingers and Gene Tennis to pull off a fake intentional walk with Cincinnati's Johnny Bench at the plate. It worked then as well. But we will never see this cloak and dagger move again after Major League Baseball changed the rule in 2017 to speed up the game by allowing managers to signal for an automatic intentional walk from the bench. The fake-out has been retired. On this day in 1972, 8 members of Black September, an offshoot of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, invaded the Israeli Olympic living quarters with guns drawn, taking hostages, and demanding the release of 236 Arab prisoners. Day 10 of the games had already been put into the books, and there was a more relaxed atmosphere with the end just a few days away. The terrorists had been scouting the location for more than a week, and they knew how to get in and what room to attack. Wrestling coach Moshe Weinberg fought back, attacking one of the terrorists with a knife and knocking another unconscious. Weinberg's aggression allowed another Israeli athlete to flee to safety. Unfortunately, Weinberg was shot and killed soon after. Italian-born Israeli weightlifter Yusef Romano, a veteran of the 1967 Six-Day War, also fought back, slashing one of the attackers with a knife and grabbing his gun. He also was shot and killed. 9 Israeli athletes became hostages, and a long standoff began as German police surrounded the compound. At that point, the terrorists started bargaining for themselves, requesting helicopters to take them to a military base in Munich and a plane to fly them to Cairo. On the 6th, the helicopters were arranged, and the hostages and the hostage takers were transported to the airbase. A rescue plan was devised by the West German police to disguise themselves as the flight crew on the plane and then overpower the terrorists. But that plan was deemed too risky and too dangerous and was scrapped. The second plan was to use snipers to cut down the Black September members. Snipers managed to gun down 5 of the 8 terrorists, but one of the remaining Black September members tossed a grenade in the helicopter with the Israeli athletes, killing the remaining 9. 1 German police officer was also killed. The 3 remaining terrorists fled, but they were soon caught. Nearly 24 hours after it began, ABC's Jim McKay issued the statement, "They're all gone." Along with Moshe Weinberg and Yusef Romano, the other 9 Israeli athletes, coaches, and support staff were referee Yusef Gutfrund, weightlifters David Berger, Zev Friedman, wrestlers Eliezer Halfin and Mark Slavin, track coach Amitzer Shapira, shooting coach Gahat Shor, fencing coach Andre Spitzer, and weightlifting judge Yakov Springer. The German police officer was Guido Schlosser. The games continued on the 7th. On this day in 1979, Ann Meyers became the first woman to ever be signed to an NBA contract. The Indiana Pacers signed her to a $50,000 contract and gave her a tryout with the team along with 9 other male players. There were a lot of people who thought that this was a publicity stunt, but Meyers had been an All-American at UCLA all 4 years and the most dominant women's player in the nation. She had turned down an offer to play in the newly formed Women's Basketball League because she wanted to play in the 1980 Olympic Games. But despite the fact that the boycott of the Moscow Games had not been announced yet and would not be for another 6 months, she saw the chance to play in the NBA along with her brother Dave as too good of an opportunity to pass up. Her signing the contract made her ineligible for the Olympic team, which of course became a moot point anyway. Her workouts were impressive though. Pacers coach Slick Leonard had not been a fan of this move by the front office and actually advised her not to do it. He had a bit more old-school thought about where women should be, and it wasn't on the hardwood playing basketball with the men. But she made it past the first 2 rounds of cuts before she was denied a spot on the team. Ultimately, at 5 feet 9 inches, 145 pounds, she was just a little bit undersized. She did find a place in the organization, though, signing on to be a color analyst for the Pacers television broadcasts at a time when there weren't very many women on television talking about sports. She eventually signed on to play with the New York Gems in the WBL until the league folded in 1981. And on this day in 1971, it was the closest ever finish to a Formula One race. This was the Italian Grand Prix held at Monza. On the final lap, there were 5 cars in contention with a shot at taking the checkered flag. British driver Peter Gethin was in 4th as he started his final go-round of the track, and he had one thought: push the motor to the limit, and if it didn't break, he would win. He'd never won a Formula One race, so it wasn't a surefire winning tactic, but it worked on this day. Red line on his car was 10,500 RPM, but he went well past that to 11.5 before he grabbed his top gear. As the cars crossed the line, Gethin's British Racing Motors machine nicked Sweden's Ronnie Peterson by 1/100th of a second. The top 5 drivers finished a little more than a half second apart. It was Gethin's lone career win, and in fact the only time he ever stood on the podium at an F1 event. But even though this was his only win, he did leave his mark. His average speed of 150.754 miles per hour was the fastest in Formula One for 32 years, until Michael Schumacher topped it in 2003, while also running at Monza. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. There were a lot of people saying, after the 1927 presidential election in Liberia, despite there only being 19,000 registered voters in the country. Charles King was elected to a 3rd term with 229,000 votes, to his opponent Thomas Faulkner's 9,000. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.